2020, and we are streaming live from the Village Seventh-day Adventist Church here in Southwest Michigan. We're grateful that you've decided to join us this morning, and I know that you'll be blessed. We have a wonderful seminar coming up, and it's a presentation called Hospitality Meals Made Easy, Happy Hearts and Full Bellies. And Stacy Gusky will be our presenter, and Stacy is the hospitality coordinator here at the Village Church. And she has served over 21 years as a certified teacher and administrator, both here in the Michigan Conference and also in the Indiana Conference. She's worked at Andrews University as a catering manager, and she currently serves as a church board chair for the Village Adventist Elementary School and for the hospitality coordinator, as I mentioned a moment ago, here at the church. And Stacy enjoys the challenge of providing healthy meals for large groups of people. And because of that, she has served as the meal coordinator and chef and everything in between on several mission trips to both El Salvador and out to Montana. And I have eaten some of her meals, and I've been to some of the meals she's prepared and coordinated, and she is a wonderful cook and a wonderful host. And so I know that we'll be blessed. She lives here with her husband, John, right here in Berrien Springs, and their two boys, Michael and Samuel. As we begin, and as Stacy comes onto the platform here, let's bow our heads and we'll ask the Lord to bless. Our Father in heaven, as we think about how to practically put in place the call that you've given us to help and minister to those in need, I pray that you would bless Stacy as she shares with us practical ways to be your hands in a world that is hurting. And so I ask that you'd give her grace, open our hearts to your Spirit, and may we be blessed with the presence of Jesus. In his name, amen.
Good morning and welcome to the first ever virtual Michigan camp meeting. It's a change for everybody, but I hope you'll be blessed. Today's topic is hospitality meals made easy. And people will ask me, what is the difference between a potluck and a hospitality meal? Well, here's a good analogy for you. Think of 5 minutes before Black Friday starts. The doors are crammed with people. Everybody wants to get into that superstore to get their favorite toy or that electronic that's on a ridiculously low price for 5 hours. And people are crushing up against the door. That's kind of like potluck. Hospitality meal, the analogy is if you're standing in line at an amusement park or standing in line to enter a venue. Usually you have these nice turnstiles that you're creeping through, and usually people walk in and it's neat and orderly. So those are two analogies that could be applied to describe hospitality versus a potluck. Potlucks are venues that all churches are familiar with. Everybody brings a dish to pass. Everybody goes through serving and serves themselves. Hopefully, they're not coughing on food. Hopefully, their hands are washed. Hopefully, everybody gets the amount of food that they want. In a hospitality meal, you have 3 to 5 people working together as a team. They serve the meal, so that takes away any guesswork as to whether hands have been washed on the serving utensils. It takes away guesswork as to will there be food at the end? Because the way the meal is presented, food is kept back until everyone has been served. So there are quite a few differences between hospitality and a potluck meal. Also with a hospitality meal, instead of somebody just bringing their favorite dish, it's a planned menu. So it could be an Italian-themed meal, and people would bring pasta dishes and breads and salads. It's announced in the bulletin ahead of time, so members and visitors know what will be provided and what they should bring to help contribute to the meal. Again, the biggest key to the hospitality meal is that it is served to people. That allows interfacing. That allows the hospitality team to make a contact. We know in large churches especially, those visitors come in and they may not even have an eye-to-eye contact because sometimes you're not sure if they're a visitor or a member, and it's hard to make contact even though we really need to be intentional. But if they stay for the hospitality meal, that eye-to-eye contact is at least made as they go through line. There are 3 stages of planning a hospitality meal, and it starts 4 weeks out. 4 weeks out from your meal, your team plans what they're going to serve. It could be anything from haystacks to a loaf, to a soup and salad, but that theme has to be picked. Things you want to keep in mind are specialty diets. In today's day and age, you're always going to have people that eat dairy, and you're going to have vegans attending your meal. You also will have 1 or 2 gluten-free or nut allergies, and all of these dietary needs need to be addressed in your meal. You want to do your best to offer something for everyone to eat. 2 weeks prior, that announcement goes in your bulletin so that members know what to bring. I recommend that a hospitality team provides the entree and main vegetable. That ensures that you know exactly how much of an entree you're going to have. That ensures that everyone will have an entree. So an example would be visitors and guests are asked to bring salads, breads, and desserts. Meatloaf and potatoes will be provided. So everybody knows what the meal is like, and they will provide items that go with the meal. 1 week prior, you need to start arranging for your supplies. You need to make sure that there's enough paper products. You need to make sure that you have somebody assigned for setup, cleanup, and takedown. The day of prep would be that Sabbath. Even a week prior, it's a good time to make your entrees if they're freezable. When you're setting up your line, you want to have a couple of rules of thumb. The first rule of thumb is 1 serving line per 50 people. Now, in a hospitality meal, since you have people serving food, only the outside edge of the table are where your guests are going through. So 50 people per line. So that means here in the Village Church, we have 3, sometimes 4 serving lines. But that serving line is only 1 table long, and I'll explain why in a minute. When you're setting up your serving lines, you want to have your plates on one end, and you want to put your utensils and your napkins on the end. If you've ever been a parent taking a couple of kids through line, juggling 2, 3 plates at a time, plus 3 forks, 3 knives, 3 spoons, it tends to get quite tedious. Putting those at the end means that they're not dropping their silverware. It means that the parents aren't having to juggle different plates, because as that plate goes from server to server, at the end they all get handed to the mom or the dad, and it's easier if they've collected their silverware and then they take their plates. The other thing that I've seen happen, and I hope nobody ever has to deal with it, is if that utensil, if that fork is at the beginning, I've actually seen a guest use the fork to sample the food before they decide if they want it on their plate, and that needs to be highly discouraged. It can't happen if the forks are at the end of the line. Beverages should never be on the same buffet as the rest of the food because it slows the line down. The same thing with your condiments, your butter pats, your desserts, your salad dressings, your croutons. Those should all be in a separate location because your attendees go through line and they bottleneck right at the salad because they have to think, what do I want on my salad? Do I want croutons? Do I want bacos? Do I need butter? Do I not need butter? And it holds your line up. Hospitality lines need to be fast because people want to sit down to fellowship. They want to get through line quickly. Nobody likes to be that last table at the end who goes through last because you always kind of get the hopeful helpings. You're hoping you get food. So you want to make sure that everybody gets through line in a nice manner of time. All of your tables, when you set up, in a hospitality meal, you have individual tables. In a potluck, you usually have long serving tables. Potlucks are easy to set up. You just put tables end to end to end, and you roll out a big roll of plastic tablecloth, and you're done. It's great if you're going to have school students set up. Maybe you use hospitality meals in your school gym. Or if you have a large room in your church, your meals may be there. But if you have hospitality tables, you have people facing each other, and that encourages communication. In a long table, you might communicate with the person directly across from you, sometimes the person next to you, but if possible, using a round table or individual rectangles, you're only interfacing with 6 to 8 people. In today's day, with COVID, that's easier to social distance as well, but it also encourages getting to know the people at your table. Your tablecloth should look like a restaurant. You should have a plastic tablecloth, or if your church has cloth that easily wash, please put those out. Here at Village, we put in a hand sanitizer and a table centerpiece. That centerpiece could be anything. We keep a wide range of seasonal specific table centerpieces. They could be flowers that are easily put out. It could be some Christmas tree decorations in a vase, and sometimes even a basket of apples, because people will eat those apples as they're waiting for their table to be called. And that leads you right into happy hearts and full bellies, because they're not starving when they go through line anymore. What are the easiest meals to make? Instantly, everybody goes, haystacks. Haystacks are the easiest. They fit vegans, they fit non-vegans. I think haystacks are the worst thing I could possibly serve. Why? They are messy. You always end up with a glob of sour cream on the floor. There's always bits of cheese. There's always bits of lettuce everywhere. Does it fit everybody's dietary concerns? Absolutely. Does it fit everybody's taste buds? Yep, everybody can pick everything that they like. But it's messy. It can also be expensive. If your hospitality crew is providing all of the toppings, and they should provide little bits of everything to make sure that every topping comes, it gets to be a little expensive for your crew. The meals I like are pasta meals, because they cost very little to make and they serve a lot. They can be vegan. If I'm making a lasagna, it's very easy to do a gluten-free vegan lasagna. Instead of doing 3 dishes, I'm only doing 2, one with cheese and a gluten-free noodle dish that is also vegan. Soup, salad, breads, desserts. Soup, sandwich, wraps, and desserts. If you're going to do a sandwich, you want to make sure that it's pre-made. Again, sandwiches are very easy to do vegan. Loaf, potatoes, veggies, dessert, bread. Again, I would have my vegan loaf also be gluten-free, so that I'm only making 2 different kinds instead of 3. Enchilada, casseroles, rice, vegetables, salads, desserts. Those enchiladas are the most inexpensive meal you can possibly make. I know it looks very, very pretty to have your nicely, neatly rolled enchiladas in your 9x13 pan, and you have them all lined up, and they look beautiful, and presentation is a huge part of serving food. But in that 9x13 pan with rolled up enchiladas, you feed 6 people. If your potluck or your hospitality meal is for 150, how many of those 9x13 pans do you need to make? It's a lot easier if you layer them, and then when you layer them, a 9x13 pan can easily feed 12 people. So you're doubling. You're also using a lot less ingredients. Now you notice on each one, I said dessert. There are some churches that have said, we don't serve dessert. You always end up having somebody that brings a dessert, whether it's a visitor or whether it's a member that really doesn't agree with the policy of no desserts. You're always going to have a dessert brought. And it's better to cut the dessert and put it out and have enough for everyone than to just have one dessert and say, well, we can't serve it because we don't have enough for everyone. And then you risk offending the person that brought it. But if you cut it and put it out, then those that don't get dessert are also offended. So it's better to provide dessert and ask your members to bring a variety of healthy desserts plus their favorites. And those that want to abstain can. Those that want a healthy dessert that may be just fruit, they have those options, as well as those that want to treat Sabbath as a special treat and indulge in some sugar. Most questions I get from people are, how do I know how much food to prepare? I get this question a lot. This chart works very well. That 9x13 pan that most people have sitting in their kitchens, 10 to 12 people, depending on your servings. But that changes if you switch to meatballs, which is why I only serve meatballs for special occasions. I'll turn those meatballs, it's the same recipe, into a loaf because it feeds so many more people. Half deck pan. You all know what a deck pan is. I'm going to describe it, and then you'll go, oh yeah, I do. Those big silver serving pans that go in either a chafing dish to keep it warm or in a cafeteria serving line, those are deck pans. A half of those is just like a 9x13 pan, and it serves 10 to 12. A full one that's about 2 inches deep is called a full shallow. You can get 30 servings of loaf out of that if you fill it to the top and if you're filling all the airspace inside. If you have a deep deck pan, those can get really, really heavy. So you only want to put light things in, like your vegetables, rice, maybe a potato dish, chopped up potatoes. I used to love putting my scoop lasagna in it because 3 deck pans and I've got 200 servings, no problem. However, you go to pick it from the end and it buckles in the middle. You go to pick it up from the sides, and it buckles this way. You can say, well, let's just solve it, put a pan under it. Okay, those lasagna pans that are filled up to the top, they're about 80 pounds by the time you do all of your cheese and your noodles. So it gets heavy. Save yourself time and energy. Just double your quantity of pans. Do 6 shallow instead of 3 deep. Crock pots or tureens. Soup is a great October through February meal for your hospitality crew. But you have to remember, 1 gallon serves 8 people. Most crock pots are 2.5 gallons, so you're going to get 16 to 20 8-ounce cups of soup. Most people do want more than 8 ounces, so you end up needing, for 100 people, you end up needing several crock pots. Now, if you're like me, you have some abnormally large crock pots that are 10 gallons, and those are really easy to use. On the day of the meal, it's very nice to have a food tag that your church will fill out as they bring in their dishes. It tells the name of the dish, the person that brought it, and then they can circle anything that's in the dish, whether it has nuts, dairy, wheat, soy. They can circle if it's gluten-free with nuts, if it's gluten-free with dairy, or if it's totally vegan, but they can still also circle if there's nuts. Why is this food tag important? Because as a hospitality coordinator, I will say, oh, that beautiful dish, it's gorgeous. I want to make sure the person gets it back. I know exactly who it belongs to. And if it's a special dish, I will, at the end of the meal, pick it up and take it right to them to know that they get it. I can also ask them if a visitor has a question on what's in the dish. I know exactly who to ask. So these are little paper tags. They just tape it or stick it right on the dish and then put their dish in the fridge, or they leave it on the counter if it doesn't need to be refrigerated. Food safety. This is a big one when you're in the kitchen, especially in today's day and age. If and when we can ever start serving meals in the churches again, we need to make sure that we're wearing gloves and that we change them repeatedly. Before you put those gloves on, you need to be scrubbing your hands past the wrists, getting your fingernails, getting the backs, getting in between, rinsing them, drying them with paper towel, gloving up, putting on your apron. Ladies, if you have long hair, that hair needs to be back. I know in the kitchen, if you walk into my crew when we're in the kitchen, we're called the helmet heads because every hair is shellacked into place with Aquanet, that hairspray that just holds everything. We don't want to have hair in our food. If your hair is long and you didn't put it up, or gentlemen, if you happen to have long hair, it needs to be in a hairnet. Never eat over food. If you want to sample something, you need to do it just like you would on the serving line. You want to scoop out food, put it on a plate, walk away, maybe go sit at a table and eat your meal. When you're working with the food, again, never touch your face, never sneeze near the food. You need to be able to preempt and walk away. You also need to make sure that you're not sick. If you're well enough to be at church, which means you don't have any symptoms of any kind of illness, then you're well enough to be in the kitchen. What happens if you need to get something out of the fridge or you need to check something in the oven? Those gloves have to come off. Then you have to open your fridge. You have to look at the stove. You rewash. You put new gloves on. It's not unheard of for me to go through 15 pairs of gloves in one hospitality meal. Gloves is one of the expenses your church will incur, and it's the safest barrier that they can to keep yourself as the kitchen crew safe and your visitors. What is that timeline? People will say, I don't want to be on a hospitality or potluck meal because it takes so much time. It really doesn't. From 10:30, when Sabbath school is over, until the meal is totally done around 3 o'clock, it's a few hours. But where is that with God's time? You're giving to God those hours. It's not much to give. And if it's organized well, you really don't realize the time is passing. So when the Sabbath timeline starts at 10:30 after Sabbath school, you enter the kitchen. The hospitality coordinator will organize the food. Hot food in one area, cold food in another, breads, desserts, and then they assign who's going to do what. Usually when you get to know your crew, you know that there's 2 or 3 people that love to cut the desserts. And they love to cut the desserts because then they set aside what they want to eat. You have those that are always bread preppers, those that like to monitor the oven and switch food out. Our kitchens in most of our churches are not considered a cooking kitchen. They are a reheating kitchen. So it's very important that you instruct your church not to bring food that hasn't been cooked. We need to be warming it up only. So turning the oven on to 200, you can layer those casseroles so they're not right on top of each other, but you can use cookie sheets and you can get 15 to 20 of those 9x13 pans in a normal oven if you're stacking them right. And that allows you to get everything warmed up and ready to serve by noon or whenever you normally get out. Other things you need to assemble, you need to check those salads. A lot of times salads come unassembled and they have to be put together. You need to make sure that your serving lines are ready. You need to make sure that every person on the team has a job and that everybody is able to participate. Just prior to serving your serving lines, you're going to determine who's going to be standing at each station. I use one table for serving, so I end up with 3 lines back to back. I don't put all the food out at once. I keep food back. On a serving line, you'll have an entree, the main vegetable, maybe a couple of sides, bread, and your utensils. By putting some of that on each line, it does allow people to pick and choose what line they want to go through, but it also saves food back and allows that food to be stretched. If something is on the table, they're going to want to sample it. If it's out of sight, it's out of mind, and that allows you to make sure that you titrate your food throughout your visitors so that the same person that's at the end versus the person at the beginning has the same quantity to choose from. You assign people to serve each dish. That first person in line is crucial. They're going to be the first line of contact of your visitors coming through. It needs to be somebody who can start a conversation, maybe help people joke and laugh, because as people are waiting, if there's a slowdown at the end of the line, you have people waiting. Joking and being able to start conversations keeps the conversations flowing, and it makes that heart happy. Again, the goal of the meal, happy hearts and full bellies. The first person in line also has to remember what's in the entree. So you're going to talk to them and you're going to say, this is a loaf. It has dairy, nuts, and eggs in it. And then the next one would be, this is the vegan loaf. It also has nuts. So they have to keep track of what is what. The servers will look down and they'll determine what a serving size is. It's very important that you put the proper serving utensil in. If you are only serving a small handful of food, for, say, it's peas, you could probably even go smaller than that. Peas are not always somebody's favorite. You want to make sure that you're not giving them a soup ladle to serve, because everybody's going to get a full soup ladle, and pretty soon you've run out of peas. You also want to make sure your loaf is cut. If you have a pan that you need to get 30 servings out of, you need to make sure it's cut into 30 servings. When people enter your hospitality room for the meal, you'll instruct them to sit down, you'll get their attention, and you'll go through which food has which items. You can say the first line is all vegan. You can say the second line, the third line, they have the dairy, and everything has nuts in it. If you are allergic to nuts, you want to avoid the entree. And then that gives people the opportunity to ask as they're going through line, what nut is it? You would then have prayer. You would instruct the people that they are going to be dismissed, and you would also let them know that seconds will be available when it is announced. Having these structures in line makes your meal flow and makes people sit and communicate, and everybody then knows what's going on. Again, you're going to want to welcome them. You're going to thank them for being patient. That's a big one. Thanking them is a reminder to them that everybody in the room needs to be served. Everybody at one point or another needs to be told, be patient. You also thank them if they brought food. Everybody likes to be recognized. You also remind them about those dirty dishes. One thing I've had to work with my crew on is we do not wash individual dishes. And some people will say, well, why? That's a service we can do for people. They don't have to take home a dirty dish. It expands the hospitality. Well, what happens when somebody has 3 or 4 clear 9x13 pans at home? One of them has a fluted edge, one has a straight edge, and they grab one, they make their dish, they bring it to Potluck, and somebody else does the exact same thing. So they're going through line. They've got these beautiful, sparkling, clear dishes. One's fluted, one's not. And they go, oh, I must have brought that one instead, and they go home. However, if you don't wash the dish, and there's a fluted one with red sauce and a flat-edged one with a white sauce, they can look at it and go, I have one like that, but I didn't bring a red sauce. And then they end up picking up the right dish. There are times you do have to wash the dish, and that's at the very end. As you are cleaning up, you may realize somebody forgot their dish. Then those have to be washed. But not washing them greatly cuts down on how many dishes are left behind. One of the issues you would have going through line is what to do if somebody gets a big serving of that full dairy entree, and they get to the vegan dish and they want a serving of that as well. The first thing you say is, well, it's either or. I see you have a piece of loaf that is all dairy and has eggs. If you're vegan, we need to get you a new plate. And they'll say, oh, no. I just want a small piece. I want to sample it. You can try one more time and say, we really need to save it for those that are vegan. So if you're not, could you wait until seconds? And if they get insistent, then you give them a slice, a small slice, 2 or 3 bites, because remember, they themselves said, I just want to taste it. So you give them that taste and move them on, because that's part of happy hearts. You don't want to get into a conflict. Number one, everybody in line is listening, and they're waiting to see how you treat them. And you're the hospitality crew. You're supposed to treat them as God. They're supposed to look at you and not see you. They want to see Jesus. And so making sure that they have that happy heart when they walk away from your station is the most important. What about the runner? The runner is the group lead. If you remember, I said I don't put all the food out at once. Well, that requires that somebody is in charge of refilling that table. So there's a runner. Usually that's the hospitality coordinator for that team. So if it's myself, if it's my team, you will see me running in and out of the kitchen and all around the room, keeping track of things like how many tables are left to be served. Does the dessert line need to be refilled? Which tables need more entree? Do they need more bread? Do I need to put out more butter pats? The runner should be the one that is the most physically mobile. If you're using containers that are heavy, you could also pull a gentleman in to help you with the heavy dishes. The group runner or the lead also determines who takes the laundry home. Whether you use cloth tablecloths or drying rags, you're going to have some laundry. Those aprons, our church uses cloth aprons, so those always have to be taken home and washed. They are also the point of contact for planning. And if there's a conflict in the meal at some point, and you'll always end up with a conflict at some point in your service, whether it's once a year or once every 10 years, you're going to have some kind of conflict. That leader, that runner, is in charge of taking care of it. What are some of those difficulties that are encountered? Well, first of all, how to handle them. The first thing you need to be doing is praying. Before you answer a conflict, you should have that quick prayer that goes up into your head. You're always going to have those that want to be dismissed first. Every hospitality meal I've served, I have 1 or 2 very specific people that come up and say reasons why they need to be served first. They were served last, the last 10 meals. They want to go first. They're very, very hungry. They have to eat. If they're hungry, that can be solved. How about I give you a roll, and that will help tide you over until your table is served. Usually that pacifies and you can move on. What about those guests that become angry? Sometimes that happens. They may not have liked the way you looked at them. They may have been upset with the quantity of food that they were given. I did have somebody that was upset once because they were given too much food. And I just said, I'll be happy to pack it up, and that way you can take it home and you have another meal for the week. And they were pretty thrilled about that. Sometimes you have to have that extra backup. So in our church, we have an elder assigned to every hospitality meal. They're the ones that have prayer over the meal. They dismiss our tables. But then we also have a deacon crew. So when you have those guests that maybe need to go to that next extra level, maybe they're a 6'4" gentleman that is intimidating just because of his size, I usually run and find a deacon. if I can't pacify them pretty quickly. You can always walk away. You can say, thank you for your suggestion, and walk away. Remember to walk away with that smile. Happy hearts. The whole hospitality meal is making sure that everybody, including your hospitality crew, leaves the building with a happy heart. You have your typical cleanup checklist. You're going to want to make sure that your cleanup checklist for your building is posted so that everybody who is working to help clean up knows exactly what needs to be done. It keeps them from constantly checking in with the coordinator. They can go to the board and they say, okay, tablecloths have to come off. Okay, we're going to go do tablecloths. Usually, if you start taking down tablecloths, guests that are finished and their table's just about empty, they usually pitch in to help. Large particles of food need to be picked up. Here in our church, we don't usually clean the room after our hospitality meal. It's cleaned after Sabbath, but we want to make sure that those globs of sour cream from your haystacks get picked up. You want to make sure if there's major spills around family tables, you want to make sure those are cleaned up, because the last thing you want in God's house are mice and roaches. And the last thing you also want is somebody to walk in and go, wow, what kind of animals ate in here? You want to make sure that everybody leaves and comes back with a happy heart. More of your kitchen checklist, you want to make sure that you never leave dishes out. Even if they're drip drying, grab some paper towel, dry them, put them away. Again, if the unfortunate thing happens and you do get mice in your kitchen, any dish that's left out now has to be rewashed because you don't know if it was climbed over. Other things that you need to make sure that you do is wiping down the counters, sweep the floor, take those dirty linens home, and lock and walk out the door. Our hospitality crews usually get to leave by 3 o'clock. If those that are stuck there and they'll tell me, hey, it was there until 4:30, I usually say, your next meal, let me come in and find out what processes we can shorten, because you shouldn't have to stay past 3 o'clock. Even with our largest groups, when we've had meals for 500 people, the hospitality crew has been out the door by 3 o'clock. What about those food leftovers? This is a tricky topic because no food that's been on a serving line should be saved. I don't care if it can be frozen. I don't care if it's half a dish full of food. If it's been on that serving line, it is now contaminated because you have served it with gloves and you've had somebody serving it. It's great then, but what about when you call for seconds? Your serving crew is done, they're sitting down eating and serving yourself seconds or self-serve. It's now you don't know what has happened to that dish. Well, first, the leftovers belong to the person that brought the dish. They get to decide what happens to it. They can say, nope, I don't care, I'll take it home. They can say, get rid of it. They can say, if somebody wants to take it, they can take it. The best thing to do is to ask the owner. Now, if it happens to be part of your hospitality crew and your crew made the entree and nobody really wants to take it home, then you're left with, do we find a family that we know is struggling for food and take it to them? Do we throw it out? We can't save it because it's been on the serving line. Sometimes somebody will come in and go, what are you doing with those leftovers? The easiest way, especially in your mind if you're thinking, I'm going to probably throw this out because nobody wants to take it home, the best thing to say is, what is your suggestion? Usually they come up with something that may not have been thought of, or they'll have a family in need in mind, and you can help package it up for them so they can take it, or they'll say, well, I have no clue, and they walk off. But they've been heard. You got them to voice. They wanted to say, what are you doing with it? And if they have no clue, then that's your cue of, you might need to just throw it out. If it hasn't been on the serving line, if it's in the oven, it's perfectly acceptable to freeze it if you can, or to put it in the fridge. If you know of an exact date and time in the next 5 days that it can be served, you can put it in the fridge. What about throwing food away? Sometimes food just has to be thrown out. You don't want to have large amounts of food in your trash cans. It will tend to offend people. So, one, you never let people see you throw food away. you disguise it, and you make sure that trash bag goes out to the garbage right away. Because again, happy hearts. You want people to know that your church is doing everything it can to be safe for the environment, that it's doing everything it can to meet the needs of people in the community. But sometimes there's just food that's been on the line. Maybe it wasn't a favorite dish and the owner has left, or they served it in a disposable pan, and you know they're not in the building anymore and you can't freeze it. Nobody wants to take it home. Garbage disposal or the trash can are your only two solutions. Odds and ends. Do not eat in the serving line. Don't touch your face. If you have to sneeze, you walk away. If you're well enough to be at church, you're well enough to serve. But remember, as a kitchen hospitality coordinator, that kitchen is your first line of safety, and only your kitchen crew belongs in the kitchen. This is especially for food safety in today's day and age. You have to monitor what goes on. One of the biggest issues a hospitality coordinator will face and needs to be met with prayer is a story that happened to me several years ago. I had a meal going on. It was in the evening, and I had people volunteer to come help me. And one individual was not a baptized member, but they had been attending church, but they hadn't gone through any of our doctrines yet, and they were not aware of clean versus unclean food. And she walked in and she said, "I'm going to help you, but first I have to put my pasta salad together." Okay, no problem. I'm flying around the room, and I see her take noodles, mayonnaise, vegetables, and a nice sized jar of real bacon chips and put them on the counter. And I just turned around and I just said, "Lord, you have to handle this. I don't know what to do." And I continued flying around doing everything I need to do to get the meal ready. She cooked her pasta, she made her sauce, she chopped her vegetables, and the whole time I'm like, "Lord, I don't know what to do. You got to handle this." She shakes in the bacon bits, and "Lord, I'm running out of time. You got to handle this." She takes a big bite. This is my favorite pasta salad. She takes a big bite, and the look on her face. And she went, "Something's wrong." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She goes, "It's rotten." And I looked at her mayonnaise. It was perfectly within its expiration rate. I looked at the dish. It looked good. It didn't look spoiled. I checked all the ingredients. None of them were rotten. And she's like, "I can't serve this." And I said, "Okay." And I turned and I walked away and I smiled to myself, said, "Thank you, Lord." Walked right on. He handled it. There was no conflict. I didn't have to address it right then. It's okay to just stop and let God handle it. Remember, at the end of everything, the most important thing is how people feel when they leave your meal. Happy hearts and full bellies. You do everything you can to make sure that people have that happy heart. Thank you so much.